A female police officer vanished without a trace in 1977 while on patrol, leaving her colleagues and family desperate for answers. But 13 years later, investigators search a frozen lake, and what they find beneath the ice sends shockwaves through the entire community. The thin December light spilled through Kate Brennan's bedroom window, casting long shadows across her small apartment. She squinted at the snowflakes beginning their silent descent outside, transforming Lakewood into a winter wonderland. 27 years old with short chestnut hair, Kate methodically buttoned her navy blue uniform, each movement practiced and precise. Her fingers lingered momentarily on her badge, number 217, before pinning it to her chest with quiet pride. The apartment walls told her story, a framed photograph of her police academy graduation, her parents standing tall beside her, another of last summer at Lake Washburn, David's arm around her waist, his history books temporarily forgotten as they smiled into the camera. She touched the engagement ring on her finger, thinking of their spring wedding plans. Just 5 more months. Outside, the snowfall intensified. Kate wrapped her department-issued scarf around her neck and headed into the gathering storm. Joe's Diner sat at the heart of Lakewood, its windows steamed up against the cold. The bell above the door announced Kate's arrival, drawing smiles from the morning regulars. "Officer Brennan," Joe called from behind the counter, his gray hair catching the light from the overhead lamps. "Your usual?" Kate nodded, sliding onto her regular stool. "Weather's turning fast, Joe. The roads are already getting slick." Joe placed a steaming cup of coffee before her, followed by perfectly browned toast. "They're saying it might be the worst storm of the year. You be careful out there tonight." Kate spread raspberry jam across her toast, exchanging greetings with Mr. Peterson from the hardware store and Mrs. Gillespie, the elementary school principal. These morning rituals anchored her to Lakewood, a town she'd sworn to protect. 40 minutes later, Kate entered the police station, nodding to dispatch before opening her locker. She carefully placed her personal items inside, a lipstick, her wallet, and the wedding catalog she'd been marking during breaks. The pages were dog-eared, several dresses circled in red ink with price notes in the margins. Officer Mark Johnson passed by, glancing at the catalog. "Still planning for spring? Brave to have an outdoor ceremony in Minnesota." Kate smiled. "David's family has this beautiful property by the lake. When the ice melts, it's perfect." Before starting her shift, Kate picked up the station phone and dialed her parents' number. Her mother answered on the 3rd ring. "Kate, I was just thinking about you." Eleanor Brennan's voice warmed the line. "Hi, Mom. Just checking in before my night shift starts. How's Dad?" "Oh, you know George. Pretending retirement isn't driving him crazy. He's reorganizing the garage for the 3rd time this month." A pause. "I finished the sleeve on your Christmas sweater, navy blue, just like you wanted." "Can't wait to try it on," Kate replied, glancing at the clock. "I should go. Briefing starts soon. Love you both." The station's meeting room filled with officers as Sergeant Mike Lawson, a veteran with salt and pepper hair and perpetually tired eyes, stood at the front. Maps of Lakewood covered the walls, the northern patrol routes highlighted in red. "Evening, everyone," Lawson began, gesturing toward the windows where snow now fell in earnest. "Weather Service has upgraded tonight's forecast to a severe storm warning. Visibility will drop to near zero by midnight. Brennan, you're taking the North Sector tonight." Kate nodded, making notes in her small pad. North Sector included Ellis Creek Bridge and the western shore of Lake Washburn, beautiful in summer, treacherous in winter. At 6 o'clock, Kate slid into her patrol car, starting her shift as darkness fell across Lakewood. The police radio crackled with updates about the worsening conditions. "All units be advised, county roads are becoming impassable. Highway Patrol is reporting multiple stranded vehicles." For the first few hours, Kate handled routine calls, helping an elderly couple whose car had slid into a ditch, breaking up teenagers throwing snowballs at passing vehicles, checking on Mrs. Winters who'd called concerned about noises outside her house, just branches scraping against windows. The windshield wipers worked overtime as Kate constantly cleared the accumulating snow. By 10:30, the town had fallen eerily quiet, most residents wisely staying indoors. Kate sipped from her thermos, adjusting the heater. The police radio interrupted the silence. "Attention all units. Weather Service has issued an extreme condition warning. Visibility reduced to less than 50 meters. All non-emergency personnel advised to seek shelter immediately." Kate acknowledged the message, then slowed as her headlights caught something unexpected: fresh tire tracks veering off the road near Ellis Creek Bridge. Strange. Nobody should be out in this weather. Following procedure, she radioed in. "Dispatch, this is Unit 217. I'm at Ellis Creek Bridge. There appear to be fresh tracks leaving the road toward the lake. Going to investigate." "Copy that, 217. Proceed with caution." Kate followed the tracks with her flashlight beam, the snow nearly knee-deep now. Approximately 50 yards from the road, she spotted it. A dark sedan, partially snow-covered, parked dangerously close to the lake's frozen edge. Returning to her patrol car, Kate reached for the radio again. "Dispatch, Unit 217. I've found an abandoned vehicle near the shoreline of Lake Washburn. No visible occupants. We'll check and report back." "Copy, 217." Kate grabbed her flashlight and service weapon, adjusting her heavy coat before stepping back into the blizzard. The wind had intensified, turning snowflakes into stinging projectiles against her face. The abandoned car sat dark and silent. Kate approached cautiously, flashlight beam cutting through the night, illuminating empty seats through frosted windows. No footprints led away from the vehicle. The storm had already erased them. She tried the driver's door, unlocked. Inside, the keys dangled from the ignition. Kate frowned, scanning the immediate area with her flashlight. Why would someone abandon their car here, in this weather? A movement caught her eye, something near the lake's edge. Kate turned, squinting through the swirling snow. Was that a figure standing on the ice? "Hello?" she called, voice immediately swallowed by the howling wind. "Police officer, do you need help?" Kate stepped toward the frozen lake, her boots crunching through the fresh snow. The beam of her flashlight danced across the ice, searching for what she thought she'd seen. While the blizzard transformed the night into a whirling white oblivion, the headlights of Kate's patrol car remained on, illuminating the empty space where her footprints led toward the mysterious vehicle. Footprints that, within minutes, would be completely erased by the falling snow, along with any evidence of what was about to happen. David Matthews jolted awake at 6:15 in the morning, his hand instinctively reaching across the empty space beside him. The sheets were cold, untouched. He blinked at the bedside clock, disoriented for a moment, before reality crashed down with crushing weight. Kate hadn't come home. He sat up, pushing his disheveled hair from his forehead, fumbling for his glasses on the nightstand. The apartment was silent, devoid of Kate's morning routine. No coffee brewing, no shower running, no soft humming as she prepared for the day. David reached for the phone, dialing Kate's apartment first, letting it ring until the mechanical click of her answering machine echoed in his ear. "She must have stayed at her place," he muttered unconvincingly, fingers trembling as he dialed the police station next. The night dispatcher answered, voice heavy with the end of a long shift. "Lakewood Police Department. This is David Matthews, Kate Brennan's fiancé," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "She didn't come home last night. I'm worried." A long pause followed. "Hold please, Mr. Matthews. I'll connect you with Sheriff Gunderson." The phone clicked and David's heart sank further. Why would they transfer him to the sheriff for a simple question? Minutes later, Tom Gunderson's gruff voice came through the line. "Mr. Matthews, I was about to call you." The sheriff's typically confident tone sounded strained. "We've got a situation." Kate never returned from her patrol last night. Her last radio contact was around 10:45 near Ellis Creek Bridge. David gripped the phone tighter, knuckles whitening. "What do you mean she never returned? There must be a procedure for this, right? Someone must have gone looking?" Officers Haverford and Miller responded to her location after she failed to check in, Gunderson explained. The storm was at its worst. They found tire tracks leading toward the lake, but no sign of Kate or her patrol car. "We're mobilizing search teams now that the storm has eased." "I'm coming down," David said, already pulling on clothes, not waiting for a response before hanging up. The snowfall had slowed to gentle flurries by morning, but the town lay buried under nearly 2 feet of fresh powder. David navigated the partially plowed streets, his mind racing through increasingly desperate scenarios. At the police station, a flurry of activity greeted him. Officers huddled around maps, radios crackling with search coordinates, phones ringing constantly. Sheriff Gunderson stood at the center, pointing at a large map of Lakewood County. He looked up as David entered, offering a grim nod of acknowledgement. "We've got 4 teams out already," Gunderson explained, circling areas with a red marker. "Highway Patrol is sending additional units. The problem is the snow. It's covered everything. Evidence, tracks, it's all buried." David stared at the map, at the small X marking Ellis Creek Bridge. What was she doing out there? That area is practically deserted in winter. Before Gunderson could answer, Bill Haverford approached, snow still clinging to his uniform. His face was drawn with exhaustion, eyes bloodshot from the night's ordeal. "Sheriff, we've expanded the search radius around the bridge. The visibility was near 0 last night," Haverford reported. "All we found were partial tire tracks leading toward the lake, but they disappeared under the fresh snow." David struggled to process this information when the station door burst open. Eleanor and George Brennan entered, their faces etched with fear. Eleanor clutched a navy blue sweater to her chest, her knuckles white against the wool. George, his face weathered from decades as a firefighter, immediately approached the sheriff. "Tom, what happened to my daughter?" he demanded, voice breaking slightly despite his attempt at composure. Eleanor moved to David's side, gripping his arm. "She would never stay out of contact willingly," she whispered. "Never." The atmosphere in the station grew increasingly tense as the morning progressed. George studied the maps with the search coordinators, offering insights from his years of rescue experience. "The lake currents run strong under that ice," he explained, pointing to areas east of the bridge. "If the car somehow went in, it wouldn't stay where it entered." By noon, volunteers from town began arriving. Neighbors with snowmobiles, locals with tracking dogs, retired law enforcement offering assistance. The community room transformed into a command center, with Eleanor arranging food for search teams, her hands constantly busy to keep her mind from spiraling into despair. David joined a search party headed for the bridge, riding in a patrol car with Officer Miller. The landscape was unrecognizable, transformed into endless white dunes. At Ellis Creek Bridge, the scene was controlled chaos. Vehicles with flashing lights, teams trudging through deep snow, officers marking areas already searched. "Kate is smart," David said to nobody in particular as they surveyed the frozen expanse of Lake Washburn. "She's resourceful. If anyone could survive out here." Late afternoon brought no developments, the short winter day already fading to dusk. Search teams returned to base, faces grim, shoulders slumped with fatigue and disappointment. Sheriff Gunderson gathered everyone in the community room. "We're suspending ground operations until morning," he announced, raising his hands to quiet the protests. "It's not safe in the dark. The temperature is dropping again, and we risk losing more people. Helicopter search will continue with thermal imaging if weather permits." David watched Eleanor's face crumple at the news, George placing a protective arm around her shoulders. He felt hollow, suspended between hope and dread. As people dispersed, he remained at the map, staring at the area where Kate was last known to be. Sheriff Gunderson approached, placing a heavy hand on David's shoulder. "We'll find her, son. Kate's one of our own. We won't stop looking." David nodded mechanically, unable to voice the fear growing inside him. As he prepared to leave, to spend another sleepless night waiting by the phone, the radio on the sheriff's desk suddenly crackled to life with the urgent voice of an officer at the search site. "Sheriff, we just found something buried in the snow. It appears to be Officer Brennan's badge, and there's what looks like frozen bloodstains around it." The discovery of Kate's badge sent shockwaves through the station. Sheriff Gunderson immediately ordered the area cordoned off, transforming what had been a search and rescue operation into something more ominous. By dawn, the crime scene technicians had arrived from the county office, meticulously photographing the badge where it lay in the snow, the frozen droplets of blood creating a macabre halo around the metal. The blood sample is being rushed to the lab, the lead technician informed Sheriff Gunderson as they stood in the bitter morning air. But given the position and the spray pattern, someone was injured here, possibly seriously. The sheriff nodded grimly, watching as David stared at the evidence markers, his face ashen. "We need to expand the search perimeter immediately and get those divers here as soon as possible." Within hours, the isolated area near Ellis Creek Bridge had transformed into a hub of activity. Search teams were divided into quadrants, each assigned specific areas to comb through the snow-covered landscape. Volunteers from Lakewood and neighboring towns arrived in waves, determination etched on their faces as the sheriff gave them instructions. "Remember, document everything before you touch it," Gunderson reminded them, pointing to the expanded map. "The storm may have buried evidence, but it also preserved it. Nothing is too small to report." By mid-morning, a specialized dive team had arrived from the county department. They assessed the frozen lake with professional concern, eyeing the ice that had partially cracked and refrozen during the storm. The lead diver, a veteran named Thompson, conferred with his team before approaching the sheriff. "The ice layer is nearly 50 centimeters thick in parts, but there are unstable sections," Thompson explained, pointing toward darker patches on the frozen surface. "And the currents underneath are stronger than normal because of the recent temperature fluctuations. Visibility will be near zero." Despite the challenges, the dive team began preparations, cutting through the ice at strategic points while search dogs were led to the area. The German shepherds sniffed eagerly at a piece of Kate's uniform, provided by Eleanor with trembling hands. When released, they raced across the snow, following an invisible trail that led directly to the lake's edge. There, they circled in confusion, barking and pawing at the ice. "They've lost the scent at the water," the handler explained to David, who had insisted on observing. "That could mean many things." By early afternoon, the first divers had entered the frigid waters. Their tethered exploration was slow and methodical, hampered by the dark conditions and swirling silt. After 40 minutes they emerged, faces grim as they removed their masks. "The visibility down there is practically zero," one reported, shivering despite his thermal suit. "The currents are disorienting, and there's debris scattered across the bottom. We'll need more time and better equipment." As the day progressed, the search operations expanded, but yielded little. The sheriff was fielding constant calls in his makeshift command center when a black SUV pulled into the area. A tall man in his early 40s emerged, his dark suit barely visible beneath a heavy overcoat. He surveyed the scene with calculating eyes before approaching the sheriff, presenting his credentials. "Martin Reynolds, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension," he introduced himself. "The state office sent me to assist with the investigation of your missing officer." Sheriff Gunderson's expression tightened slightly. "We appreciate the help, Agent Reynolds, but we're still treating this primarily as a missing person case." Reynolds glanced pointedly at the evidence markers around where the badge had been found. "The blood suggests otherwise, Sheriff. I'd like to see all your reports and speak with those closest to Officer Brennan." Inside the heated tent serving as the command post, Reynolds set up quickly, reviewing the timeline of Kate's disappearance. He requested a private interview with David, leading him to a makeshift interview room in one of the police vans. "Mr. Matthews," Reynolds began, opening several folders on the small table between them. "I understand this is difficult, but I need to ask some standard questions. Had Officer Brennan been acting unusually in the days before her disappearance? Any arguments, concerns, unusual behavior?" David's exhaustion gave way to indignation. "What exactly are you implying?" "Nothing specific," Reynolds replied coolly, "but in cases like this, we need to explore all possibilities." "You're asking if she ran away? If she staged this?" David's voice rose as he gestured toward the window, toward the lake where divers continued their search. "You think Kate would abandon her badge, her duty, our future together?" The sheriff quickly intervened, opening the door to the tense atmosphere inside. "Agent Reynolds, I think we could all use a moment to regroup." As David stepped outside to clear his head, the radio on the sheriff's belt crackled urgently. "Sheriff, The team analyzing local vehicle reports just called in. There's no record of any car reported stolen or abandoned in the area within the past 72 hours. The mystery of the vehicle Kate had reported seeing deepened. Meanwhile, at the station, Eleanor continued her silent vigil, her fingers mechanically knitting the navy blue sweater meant for her daughter's Christmas present. Each stitch was formed and then unraveled, formed and unraveled, as if completing the garment would somehow acknowledge a finality she couldn't bear to face. George and several other former emergency service workers had joined one of the search teams, using their experience to check abandoned properties and remote areas other searchers might overlook. The silence between George and David during these searches was broken only by necessary communication, both men channeling their fear into methodical action. As daylight began to fade, a portable sonar unit was set up at the edge of the lake. The technicians frowned at the readings, adjusting settings repeatedly. "There's something down there, but the ice formation is distorting the signals. We can't get a clear image." Just before dusk, a commotion erupted at one of the ice holes. A diver surfaced abruptly, pulling off his regulator as his team helped him onto the ice. There are oil slicks rising from the bottom, about 20 meters from shore. Definitely petroleum-based, could be from a vehicle. While officers discussed the implications of this discovery, a young deputy ran toward them, clutching a radio, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "Sheriff, we just received an anonymous transmission on the emergency frequency. Someone saying that the nosy officer paid the price for seeing what she shouldn't have, and that others will follow if the searching doesn't stop." The anonymous transmission sent a wave of tension through the search teams. Sheriff Gunderson immediately ordered the frequency monitored and recorded, his weathered face hardening as he turned to Agent Reynolds. "This changes everything," Gunderson admitted reluctantly. "Someone out there knows what happened to Kate." Reynolds nodded grimly, already pulling out his phone. "I'm establishing a formal task force immediately. We'll need communications specialists to trace that transmission, forensic technicians, and additional field agents." Within hours, the BCA had transformed a section of the Lakewood Police Station into a command center. Maps covered the walls, equipment hummed, and specialists in communication technology worked to isolate and enhance the anonymous threat. The recording played repeatedly through speakers, each replay sending chills through the room. "The voice distortion is deliberate," noted a technician, adjusting settings on his equipment. "They're using some kind of modulator, making it impossible to determine gender, age, or other identifiers." David hovered at the periphery, absorbing every detail despite Reynolds' obvious displeasure at his presence. When the agent finally stepped away to take a call, David approached him in the hallway. "I'm not leaving," David stated firmly, dark circles under his eyes betraying his exhaustion. "I know Kate better than anyone here. I might notice something others miss." Reynolds straightened his tie, irritation flashing across his face. "That's precisely why you should step back, Mr. Matthews. Your emotional involvement compromises objectivity." "My emotional involvement is exactly why I need to stay," David countered, his voice low but intense. "Kate isn't just case number BCA 7734 to me. She's the woman I'm going to marry." Their standoff was interrupted when Sheriff Gunderson emerged from his office, phone pressed to his ear. His expression telegraphed the political pressure mounting as the case gained attention. "Yes, Mr. Mayor, I understand the community's concerns," he said, pinching the bridge of his nose. "But I need time to conduct a proper investigation. A threat against my officer is a threat against this department." After ending the call, Gunderson sank heavily into a chair. The mayor's worried about public confidence. A missing officer, threats on police frequencies, people are scared. Later that evening, as darkness fell over Lakewood once again, a new witness arrived at the station. Martha Winters, a 75-year-old widow who lived in a cabin overlooking the northern edge of Lake Washburn, sat nervously in the interview room. "I wasn't sure if it mattered," she explained, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. "My arthritis keeps me up most nights. I was by the window around 11 o'clock when I saw lights moving on the lake. I thought maybe ice fishermen, but in that terrible storm." Reynolds leaned forward, suddenly alert. "What kind of lights, Mrs. Winters? Vehicle headlights? Flashlights?" "More like beams sweeping across the ice. Then they disappeared." She frowned, trying to recall details. "There was a flash too, just one, bright like a camera flash, but bigger." While Reynolds pursued this new lead, the forensic team worked in a makeshift lab analyzing Kate's badge. A technician carefully swabbed the frozen blood droplets, then examined the metal under magnification. "The blood type matches Officer Brennan's." "Oh, positive," he reported to Reynolds. "But there's something else here. Residue along the edge that doesn't match environmental contaminants. We're running further tests." At the lake, the diving operation had hit a devastating setback. Overnight temperatures had plummeted another 10 degrees, significantly thickening the ice layer. "It's nearly 50 centimeters thick now," the lead diver reported, frustration evident in his voice. "We can't continue safely without specialized equipment for these conditions." Reynolds coordinated with state resources to request the necessary equipment, aware that each passing hour diminished their chances of finding conclusive evidence. Back at the station, Reynolds methodically went through Kate's personal effects. In her locker, beneath a stack of training manuals, he discovered a small notebook hidden in a waterproof bag. Inside were meticulous notes documenting suspicious activities around Lake Washburn, dates, times, vehicle descriptions, and recurring references to Ellis Creek Bridge. Several entries mentioned someone identified only as R.D., with multiple question marks beside the initials. Reynolds immediately took the notebook to Sheriff Gunderson, spreading its pages across the desk. She was conducting some kind of parallel investigation. Why wasn't this going through official channels? Gunderson examined the notes, a flicker of discomfort crossing his features. Kate was thorough, always had been since the academy. She probably wanted solid evidence before bringing it forward officially. While Reynolds pressed the sheriff for more information, Eleanor and George spent the evening in Kate's apartment, finding comfort in being surrounded by her belongings. Eleanor opened Kate's closet to select clothes for the continuing search efforts and discovered a wedding dress still in its protective wrapper, hidden at the back. "She found one," Eleanor whispered, tears flowing freely as she touched the plastic covering. "She didn't tell me she'd chosen already." Across town, David sat alone in the public library, surrounded by newspaper archives. He methodically searched through years of local reports, making connections that sent cold ripples down his spine. In the past 5 years, there had been 3 fatal accidents and 1 unsolved disappearance in the vicinity of Ellis Creek Bridge, all during extreme weather conditions. As midnight approached, Agent Reynolds slipped away to meet an informant in the darkened parking lot of a closed gas station. The man kept his face partially hidden beneath a hood, constantly scanning their surroundings. "There's been talk about a new supplier working the lake region," the informant muttered. "Product coming down from Canada. Nobody knows who's running it, but they pay well for silence, and they don't tolerate interference." While the investigation took this darker turn, the audio technician burst into the command center, excitement breaking through his professional demeanor. "Agent Reynolds, we've isolated background sounds from the anonymous transmission. There's something you need to hear. It sounds like water lapping against metal and I swear there's someone breathing with difficulty." The audio technician played the enhanced recording again, this time through high-quality speakers. The command center fell silent as the garbled threat repeated, but now everyone could clearly hear what the technician had discovered: the rhythmic sound of water slapping against metal and the unmistakable rasp of labored breathing between words. "The acoustics indicate a small, enclosed metallic space," explained the audio specialist, pointing to wave patterns on his monitor. "Likely a vehicle interior, and this rhythmic sound is definitely water movement." Reynolds leaned closer to the speakers, his expression hardening. This wasn't just a threat. This could be a recording made near or even from inside a partially submerged vehicle. By dawn, Reynolds had mobilized a specialized acoustic team to the lake. They carefully positioned themselves on a research boat equipped with directional microphones and underwater sound detection equipment, attempting to match the acoustic signature from the recording to specific areas of the lake. Water creates unique sound patterns depending on depth, current, and surrounding structures, the lead technician explained as David watched from shore, refusing to leave despite the biting cold. If we can recreate similar conditions, we might narrow down the search area. While the acoustic team worked on the lake, a significant breakthrough occurred at the station. A junior administrator, tasked with reorganizing case files, discovered a fax that had been misfiled. His eyes widened as he read the report. Raymond Daly, a convicted murderer, had escaped from a Wisconsin penitentiary 3 days before Kate's disappearance. The report had been stamped as received, but never properly distributed to officers. When presented with Daly's file, Reynolds immediately recognized the significance. The mugshot showed a 40-year-old man with a distinctive chin scar, convicted of 3 brutal murders in northern Wisconsin. The warning classified him as extremely dangerous and potentially armed. Reynolds immediately confronted Officer Vernon Miller, who had been responsible for processing incoming alerts that week. Why wasn't this information properly disseminated to patrol officers? Reynolds demanded, placing the file on the desk between them. Miller shifted uncomfortably, sweat beading on his forehead despite the office's chill. I received it by fax. There must have been a filing error. We were short-staffed that week with the holiday approaching. Reynolds studied Miller's face, noting the nervous tick at the corner of his mouth. A filing error that may have cost Officer Brennan her life, he said quietly, letting the implication hang in the air. Across town, David had taken his investigation in another direction. The public library's archive room had become his second home, newspapers spread across tables as he meticulously created a timeline of incidents around Ellis Creek Bridge. What he discovered sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the December cold. In the past 5 years, there had been 3 fatal car accidents and 1 unsolved disappearance in that same area, all during severe weather events. David carefully marked each incident on a photocopied map, connecting them with red marker. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidental, concentrated within a half-mile radius of the bridge. That evening, tension filled the town hall as Lakewood residents gathered to discuss the ongoing investigation. The meeting quickly divided into factions, some demanding increased resources for the search, others concerned about the economic impact on the small town. Of course we all want to find Kate, argued Harold Jenkins, owner of the Lakeside Resort. But this town depends on winter tourism. The Christmas festival is 2 weeks away, and reservations are being canceled left and right because people think there's some killer on the loose. George Brennan, who had been silently seething in the back row, suddenly erupted. My daughter disappeared while protecting this community, and you're worried about tourist dollars? His voice broke as Eleanor grabbed his arm, trying to calm him. What if it was your child out there? The room fell silent, shame visible on several faces. After the meeting, specialized equipment finally arrived at Lake Washburn, heavy drilling machinery capable of cutting through the thickened ice layer. Workers carefully positioned the equipment over the area where the sonar had detected anomalies, while dive teams prepared their cold water gear. Reynolds, meanwhile, traveled to the Wisconsin penitentiary to interview former cellmates of Raymond Daly. One inmate, serving 20 years for armed robbery, provided crucial information. Ray always talked about having a plan for when he got out, the man said, leaning forward across the visitation table. Said he had connections in Minnesota who'd set him up with work. Profitable work, if you know what I mean. He mentioned a lake where they moved product across the border during winter. Said the ice made it easier, not harder, if you knew what you were doing. While Reynolds pursued this lead, Eleanor found herself drawn to St. Mary's Church. The quiet sanctuary offered temporary respite from the chaos. She methodically lit candles in the small side chapel, her hands shaking slightly. Father Michael approached quietly, his aged face compassionate. The uncertainty is the hardest part, isn't it? He said gently, not knowing whether to pray for return or for peace. Eleanor nodded, tears flowing freely. "I still feel her, father. A mother knows. But with each passing day..." The silence between them said more than words could express. Back at the lake, excitement rippled through the search team as a diver emerged rapidly from the newly drilled ice hole, pulling off his mask with urgency. His face, though reddened from the cold water, showed clear distress. "We found metallic debris about 15 meters down," he reported, his breath creating clouds in the frigid air. Blue paint fragments consistent with police vehicle coloring and what appears to be a piece of uniform fabric. While the team carefully cataloged the recovered items, David and Reynolds examined the map together in the command tent, both men exhausted but driven. "Look at the pattern," David insisted, pointing to his marked locations. "Every single incident happened during extreme weather conditions: storms, blizzards, fog. That can't be coincidence." Reynolds was about to respond when his phone rang at midnight, a colleague from the Wisconsin Penitentiary with information that changed everything. "We just reviewed recordings of Daley's visitors before his escape, and one of them was Officer Vernon Miller from Lakewood, who identified himself as a security consultant." Reynolds immediately established a secure line to FBI headquarters, speaking in hushed tones, while dawn crept over the frozen landscape of Lakewood. "We need absolute discretion. If Miller has connections inside the department, any leak could compromise the entire operation." Within hours, plainclothes agents positioned themselves strategically around Vernon Miller's modest single-story home on Lakewood's outskirts. They communicated through encrypted radios, maintaining visual contact with the property while remaining invisible to casual observers. In the makeshift command center, Reynolds studied surveillance photographs spread across a folding table. The images showed Miller entering Wisconsin State Penitentiary 6 months earlier, engaged in conversation with a guard later identified as Daley's cousin. The connection was undeniable. Sheriff Gunderson sat alone in his office, staring at the arrest warrant for his officer with trembling hands. The signature line awaited his authorization, the final step to officially declare one of his own a traitor. 15 years, he whispered to the empty room. "We worked together for 15 years. At first light, the tactical team moved on Miller's residence, breaching the front and back doors simultaneously. They swept through the small house with practiced efficiency, only to find it empty. Coffee still warm in a mug on the kitchen table, the television still on, signs of a hasty departure. "He's gone," the team leader reported through his radio. "And recently, food on the table is still warm." Forensic technicians swarmed the property, methodically documenting and collecting evidence. In the bedroom, an agent noticed slight discoloration in the wooden floorboards. Upon closer inspection, they discovered a hidden compartment beneath the floor containing documents, stacks of cash, and a detailed map of Lake Washburn with marked routes. Reynolds and Sheriff Gunderson examined the recovered documents in the evidence room. The map showed precise routes across the frozen lake, delivery dates, and payment amounts. Most disturbingly, the date of Kate's disappearance had been circled with the word "compromised" written in red marker. Miller was leveraging his position to facilitate smuggling operations, Reynolds concluded, using the lake as a transport route during winter when the ice could support vehicles. Gunderson's face had aged years and hours. "Kate must have stumbled onto something. But why wouldn't she come to me?" At the lake, the recovery operation continued, with specialized deep water equipment brought in from Minneapolis. Technicians monitored the divers' progress from heated tents set up on the thickened ice while agents maintained a secure perimeter. David stormed into the station, exhaustion giving way to renewed anger after hearing about Miller's connection. "How long did you suspect something?" he demanded, confronting Reynolds. Kate could still be alive if someone had realized what Miller was doing. Reynolds didn't flinch. "We're asking ourselves the same questions, Mr. Matthews, but right now, finding Kate and bringing Miller to justice are our priorities." That evening, Lakewood's community gathered at St. Mary's Church. The mayor addressed the solemn crowd, explaining the situation while carefully omitting classified details. Gasps echoed through the sanctuary, when he mentioned Miller's betrayal. Neighbors exchanged shocked glances. Vernon had coached Little League, volunteered at the fire department fundraisers, sat beside them at community picnics for years. George Brennan stood up, his weathered face determined. "I know every inch of that lake from 30 years with search and rescue. If Miller's hiding in the area, we'll find him. I'm organizing volunteer teams to search the hunting cabins and abandoned properties around the county." Back at the station, the forensic team analyzing Kate's notebook discovered that many of her observations focused on nighttime activities on the northern shore, Miller's patrol area. She had documented unusual vehicle movements, noting repeatedly that Miller was conveniently absent during these occurrences. Eleanor Brennan, searching through Kate's childhood bedroom for photos to share with investigators, found an old letter tucked inside a high school yearbook. In it, Kate had mentioned vague concerns about something strange during Vernon's night patrols and her decision to keep an eye on the situation. Eleanor's hands trembled as she immediately called Reynolds. She knew, Eleanor whispered, Kate was investigating him. Late that afternoon, as the winter sun began its early descent, a diver emerged from the hole in the ice with unusual urgency. "We found something substantial down there," he reported, water streaming from his thermal suit. "It's large, definitely metal, and appears to be a vehicle. We need recovery equipment immediately." Reynolds coordinated with the state emergency management team to bring in specialized recovery apparatus, heavy-duty winches, reinforced cables, and flotation devices capable of helping raise a submerged vehicle through the ice. The operation was meticulously planned for first light the following morning, when visibility would be optimal. Security around the lake intensified, with armed agents patrolling the perimeter to prevent any interference. As the teams prepared for what might be the discovery of Kate's patrol car, the radio crackled, with an urgent message from the Border Patrol unit. Miller's personal vehicle had been found abandoned at a remote crossing point near the Canadian border, the driver's seat stained with blood. On the passenger seat lay a blood-smeared envelope addressed simply to "Whoever finds Kate." But Vernon Miller was nowhere to be found. The blood-stained envelope was rushed to a mobile forensics lab, where technicians in white coveralls carefully opened it, using specialized tools. Inside was a single handwritten page, the paper wrinkled and spotted with dried blood confirmed to be Miller's. Reynolds read the letter aloud to Sheriff Gunderson, their faces illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights of the command center. "I wasn't the one who made her disappear," Miller had written in shaky handwriting. "Kate was in the wrong place. She discovered the deliveries, confronted the wrong man. Look at coordinates 43° N, 95° Dria. The truth is buried there." The vague confession raised more questions than it answered. Miller admitted involvement in the smuggling operation, but deflected responsibility for Kate's fate. The coordinates, however, provided a concrete lead, one that matched the area where sonar had detected the submerged object. "This could be a negotiation attempt," Reynolds observed, setting the letter in an evidence bag. "He's wounded on the run, possibly trying to trade information for leniency." FBI analysts immediately mapped the coordinates Miller provided, confirming they indicated a location in the northern section of Lake Washburn, precisely where the recovery team was preparing to raise what they believed to be Kate's patrol vehicle. Heavy recovery equipment arrived before dawn: powerful winches, reinforced cables, and specialized flotation devices designed to work in icy conditions. Engineers constructed a temporary platform over the thickened ice, distributing the weight to prevent collapse during the delicate operation. While preparations continued at the lake, the FBI expanded their investigation into the smuggling network. Financial records revealed transactions between multiple police departments in the region, suggesting a coordinated operation that extended far beyond Miller. "This isn't just one corrupt officer," Reynolds explained during a secure briefing. "We're looking at a sophisticated smuggling ring using multiple jurisdictions as cover, likely moving drugs from Canada throughout the Midwest." David, haggard from sleepless nights but driven by grim determination, began investigating Miller's financial history. The public library provided access to property records and business registrations that showed suspicious patterns. Miller, whose salary as a deputy sheriff was modest, had made several large cash purchases coinciding with dates marked on the smuggling maps. Cross-referencing these transactions, David discovered connections to Howard Bennett, Lakewood's most prominent businessman and owner of the Lakeside Resort. Bennett's hotel had undergone significant expansions, following several of the dates marked for major deliveries. "Follow the money," David muttered, connecting the dots on his makeshift investigation board in his apartment. Red string now linked Miller's financial records to Bennett's business permits and property acquisitions. Lakewood's community, meanwhile, fractured along lines of suspicion and loyalty. Outside the coffee shop, heated arguments broke out between those who believed Miller was a lone traitor and others who suspected a broader conspiracy. "Vernon couldn't have organized something this big alone," argued Frank Wheeler, the high school principal. "He barely managed the department's softball team without help." "You're talking about respected people in this town," countered Margaret Davis, who owned the pharmacy. "People we've known our whole lives. Be careful throwing accusations around." During Bennett's fundraiser for the search efforts at his hotel, Eleanor and George Brennan observed their host with newfound suspicion. Bennett moved through the crowd collecting donations, his smile never reaching his eyes, perspiration visible on his forehead despite the room's chill. David arrived late, deliberately positioning himself near Bennett during the businessman's speech about our community coming together in this tragic time. When the crowd dispersed, David approached Bennett directly. "Interesting timing on your hotel expansions," David said quietly, maintaining steady eye contact. "They align perfectly with the delivery dates on Miller's smuggling maps." Bennett's smile faltered momentarily. "I don't know what you're talking about. I've supported the search efforts from day one." He straightened his tie nervously. "I'd be careful with those kinds of accusations, Professor. This is a small town with a long memory." At the lake, Reynolds received a crucial update from the forensic team analyzing the oil samples collected from the water. The samples contain a specialized hydraulic fluid compound only used in certain government vehicles, including police cruisers, the chemist explained. "It's a unique formulation that confirms we're dealing with Officer Brennan's patrol car." With this confirmation, the recovery operation proceeded with increased urgency. Divers connected reinforced cables to the submerged vehicle, methodically securing attachment points to ensure even distribution during the lift. The operation required precision. Too much pressure in the wrong place could damage crucial evidence. "Object secured and stable," the dive team leader reported through the underwater communication system. "Beginning elevation procedure." "Confirmed. It's a police vehicle. Registration visible on rear plate matches Unit 217. A hush fell over the recovery team as the winches engaged, cables pulling taut. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the dark mass began rising from the murky depths. Water cascaded from the vehicle's surfaces as it emerged inch by inch from its 13-year entombment. The profound silence was shattered by the sharp crack of gunfire from the nearby forest line. Bullets ricocheted off the recovery equipment, sending personnel diving for cover as the radio operator shouted, "Armed suspect! Everyone down!" Additional shots struck dangerously close to the cables supporting the partially raised vehicle. Chaos erupted as bullets tore through the recovery site. FBI agents and local police returned fire while technicians and recovery personnel scrambled for cover behind vehicles and equipment. Reynolds dropped to the ice, drawing his weapon as he radioed for backup. "All units converge on the lake recovery site. Active shooter situation." He crawled toward a snowmobile for better cover, glass shattering as another round struck nearby equipment. The tactical response was immediate and overwhelming. Agents in the perimeter quickly triangulated the shooter's position, moving through the forest with practiced efficiency. The gunfire continued for nearly 3 minutes before falling suddenly silent. "Suspect down! Suspect down!" came the call over the radio. "East perimeter, approximately 200 yards from the main recovery site." Reynolds cautiously approached the reported location, weapon drawn, where tactical team members surrounded a fallen figure in Forestry Service clothing. Tim Hodges, one of the local game wardens, lay bleeding in the snow, his rifle nearby. The 35-year-old man had been shot twice in the chest during the exchange of fire. Reynolds knelt beside the dying man. "Why try to stop the recovery? Who else is involved?" Hodges coughed, blood staining his lips as his eyes struggled to focus. "Bennett, Gunderson, all of them," he gasped, his voice barely audible. "They can't let her be found. She knew too much." His eyes glazed over as the last breath escaped his lips. Despite the attack, the recovery operation proceeded with renewed determination. Armed agents created a protective perimeter, while the recovery team returned to their positions. The winches engaged once more, and slowly the patrol car emerged from the depths, water streaming from its windows and doors. The vehicle surfaced completely after nearly 40 minutes of careful maneuvering. The assembled team fell silent at the sight. Despite 13 years underwater, Kate's patrol car remained remarkably intact, the blue and white paint dulled but still visible, the words Lakewood Police legible on the driver's door. Only the front bumper showed significant damage, bent inward, as if from a collision. The cold water and the silt layer created an almost anaerobic environment, explained the forensic supervisor as she approached the vehicle. It essentially preserved everything. The recovery team secured the car onto a reinforced platform built over the ice. Water continued to drain from the vehicle as medical examiners and forensic technicians prepared for the delicate task of examining the interior. Through the windows, cleared of condensation with special cloths, dark shapes were visible inside. Reynolds contacted Sheriff Gunderson by phone, carefully observing the man's reaction. "We've recovered the vehicle, Sheriff. There are 2 bodies inside. One is definitely Officer Brennan. We're working to identify the second individual." The sheriff's voice betrayed little emotion. "I'll be there within the hour. Have you notified the family?" "Not yet. We want positive identification first." Meanwhile, David had been systematically investigating the town records. After hours spent in the municipal building, he photographed documents showing irregular approvals for Bennett's lakeside properties. Every permit was signed by both Sheriff Gunderson and the Public Works Commissioner, and each coincided precisely with delivery dates marked on Miller's smuggling map. The forensic team worked methodically to open the patrol car without compromising potential evidence. Each step was documented with photographs and video recordings, creating an unimpeachable record of the recovery process. Special tools were used to carefully release the jammed driver's side door. The medical examiner performed an initial assessment from outside the vehicle. Based on the preservation state, I'd estimate the cold water and mud created conditions that significantly slowed decomposition. It's quite extraordinary, almost like cold storage. As night fell, portable lights illuminated the recovery site. Reynolds conducted an urgent video conference with FBI leadership from inside a mobile command unit. "We're dealing with a conspiracy that likely involves high-ranking local government officials," he reported. "Sheriff Gunderson, resort owner Howard Bennett, and potentially others in positions of authority. This appears to be a sophisticated smuggling operation that's been running for years, using the frozen lake as a transport route from Canada." The FBI director's face remained impassive on the screen. "Do you have definitive evidence connecting these individuals to Officer Brennan's death?" "We have financial records, witness testimony from the dying smuggler, and suspicious behavior patterns. The recovery of the vehicle should provide more concrete evidence." Authorization for expanded surveillance operations came through immediately, along with additional personnel and resources. Reynolds ended the call just as a forensic technician knocked urgently on the door of the command unit. "Agent Reynolds, you need to see this," she said, her expression a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "While preparing to remove the bodies, we found something unexpected under the driver's seat." Reynolds followed her to the recovery platform, where the patrol car sat under bright lights. The technician pointed to a small device partially visible beneath the driver's seat. "It's a cassette recorder, sir. It was wedged in a position that partially protected it from the water. The casing shows minimal corrosion, and the cassette is still inside. She handed him a sealed evidence bag containing the device. Based on the condition, there's a possibility the tape might be intact. It appears Officer Brennan was recording something on the night she disappeared. The cassette recorder became the focal point of the investigation, its discovery electrifying the recovery team. Carefully packaged in specialized containers to prevent further damage, the device was immediately transported to the FBI's Audio Forensics Laboratory in Minneapolis under armed escort. "This could be our most crucial piece of evidence," Reynolds told David as they watched the technicians secure the recorder. If Kate was documenting what she discovered, it could explain why she was targeted. In the lab, specialists worked around the clock to safely extract and preserve the waterlogged tape. The process required extraordinary precision. The magnetic tape, compromised by 13 years underwater, threatened to disintegrate at the slightest mishandling. "We're using a modified restoration technique developed for recovering audio from damaged NASA mission recordings," explained the lead technician, carefully transferring the cassette into a specialized drying chamber. "The cold water actually helped preserve the magnetic properties, but the tape is extremely fragile." While the painstaking audio recovery continued, the medical examiner confirmed what everyone already suspected. The body at the wheel was Catherine Brennan. The second body was positively identified through dental records as Raymond Daly, the escaped convict from Wisconsin. The preliminary autopsy revealed critical details about their final moments. The medical examiner guided Reynolds through her findings in the sterile examination room. "Officer Brennan suffered a gunshot wound to the abdomen," she explained, pointing to the injury path on a diagram. "The bullet trajectory indicates she was turned toward the back seat when she was shot, likely confronting the suspect. This type of wound wouldn't have been instantly fatal. She would have remained conscious for some time afterward." This revelation hit David particularly hard when Reynolds briefed him and Kate's parents. He collapsed into a chair at the station, the reality of Kate's death finally inescapable. Eleanor wrapped her arms around him, their shared grief momentarily bridging the tension that had grown between them over different approaches to searching for Kate. "She didn't die instantly," David whispered, his voice breaking. "She was alone, wounded, sinking into that cold water." George Brennan visited the chapel at the morgue later that day, placing his weathered hand on the body bag containing his daughter's remains. The former firefighter stood in silence for several minutes before speaking. "You fought until the end, my girl," he said softly. "Now it's our turn to fight for you." At the command center, Reynolds constructed a detailed timeline on a whiteboard, connecting the evidence they'd gathered. Kate discovers suspicious activity during routine patrols and begins investigating independently. She documents her findings, possibly on this tape. On the night she disappeared, she intercepts Daly during a delivery. There's a confrontation, shots are exchanged, and somehow the vehicle ends up in the lake. The breakthrough came 36 hours after the recorder's discovery. The audio technician burst into Reynolds' temporary office, his exhaustion evident, but eyes bright with excitement. "We've recovered partial audio," he announced. "The quality is degraded, and there are significant gaps, but there's enough to make out critical information." In a darkened room, Reynolds, David, and senior investigators gathered around speakers as the technician prepared to play the recovered audio. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation as he adjusted the equipment. "This required significant digital enhancement," he explained. "Even with our best technology, approximately 60% of the recording was unrecoverable." Then, through the speakers came Kate's voice, distorted and interrupted by static, but unmistakably hers. The sound of her speaking after 13 years of silence brought tears to David's eyes. "Suspect the operation uses the lake as static. Miller is involved but taking orders from someone higher up. Static. Saw Sheriff Gunderson meeting with Bennett at the abandoned warehouse. Static. Documenta." The fragments were enough to confirm their suspicions and justify immediate action. At the FBI field office in Minneapolis, agents prepared for coordinated arrests, studying maps of Lakewood and photographs of the suspects. The operation would need to be executed flawlessly, simultaneously apprehending everyone involved before any could warn the others. "We want all of them at once," Reynolds instructed the assembled teams. Bennett, Gunderson, the Public Works Commissioner, and any of the Forest Service personnel involved. No leaks, no warnings. While the FBI prepared their operation, David meticulously reviewed all the evidence they'd gathered. His apartment had transformed into an investigation hub, with Eleanor and George helping organize documents and photographs chronologically. Sorting through old department photographs, David discovered something telling: a Christmas party picture from 2 years before Kate's disappearance. The image showed Gunderson, Bennett, and other suspects in private conversation, with Kate visible in the background, watching them with a suspicious expression. She was already on to them, David realized. Maybe even then. As evening fell, FBI agents took positions throughout Lakewood, using encrypted communications and operating in plain clothes to avoid detection. The arrests were scheduled for dawn, when suspects would be most vulnerable and least expecting coordinated action. Reynolds finalized the operational details with his team leaders, reviewing each target's location and habits. "Remember, these are respected community figures. We need everything by the book. Impeccable evidence handling, perfect Miranda readings, no procedural errors they could exploit later." At midnight, as teams conducted final equipment checks and rehearsed their assignments one last time, Reynolds' phone rang with an urgent call from a surveillance agent. "Sir, Sheriff Gunderson just left the station carrying file boxes, and Bennett is boarding a private plane at the small airstrip. It looks like they've somehow been tipped off about the operation." "Sir, we need to move now," Reynolds barked into his radio, abandoning the carefully orchestrated dawn raid. "All teams, execute immediately. Alpha team to the airfield, Beta to intercept Gunderson on Route 16. The night exploded into action as FBI vehicles roared to life across Lakewood. Agents who had been carefully positioned for hours now moved with urgent precision, headlights cutting through the darkness as they converged on their targets. At the small private airstrip outside town, Howard Bennett was supervising the loading of his luggage onto a sleek Cessna when floodlights suddenly illuminated the tarmac. FBI vehicles surrounded the plane, agents emerging with weapons drawn. "Howard Bennett, FBI, step away from the aircraft with your hands visible." Bennett froze momentarily before attempting to dash up the aircraft stairs. An agent tackled him before he reached the door, bringing him down hard on the icy tarmac. As agents secured him in handcuffs, one opened the expensive leather suitcase that had tumbled from his grasp, revealing stacks of banded $100 bills. $2 million in cash, the agent reported, whistling softly. "Looks like Mr. Bennett was planning an extended vacation." Across town, Sheriff Gunderson's pickup truck sped along Route 16, headlights illuminating the snow-covered road ahead. His rearview mirror suddenly filled with flashing lights as 3 FBI vehicles closed in. Instead of pulling over, Gunderson accelerated, veering onto a familiar side road that led toward Ellis Creek Bridge. The pursuit ended when Gunderson skidded to a stop on the bridge itself, the same location where Kate had disappeared 13 years earlier. He emerged from his vehicle clutching a leather portfolio, rushing to the bridge railing as agents surrounded him with weapons drawn. "It's over, Tom," Reynolds called, approaching cautiously through the swirling snow. "We have the recording. Kate documented everything." Gunderson paused, halfway through the motion of tossing the portfolio into the dark water below. His shoulders slumped in defeat, the fight visibly leaving his body. In the harsh vehicle headlights, his face appeared deeply lined, aged by guilt as much as time. "It started small," he confessed, his breath clouding in the frigid air. "Just letting a few packages through, looking the other way. Then it got bigger. The money got bigger." He shook his head slowly. "I never planned for anyone to get hurt." The following morning brought a flurry of coordinated arrests that stunned the small community. The Public Works Commissioner was taken into custody while shopping for groceries. 2 Forest Service rangers were apprehended at their respective homes. A local judge was arrested while having breakfast at Joe's Diner. the very establishment where Kate had eaten her last meal. By afternoon, Reynolds stood before a battery of news cameras, the recovered patrol car visible behind police tape in the background. Our investigation has revealed a smuggling operation that utilized Lake Washburn as a transport route for approximately 5 years, he explained to the assembled reporters. This operation involved multiple public officials and was responsible for moving significant quantities of illegal narcotics from Canada into the United States. Inside the evidence room at the FBI field office, investigators methodically reconstructed the operation from recovered documents. They traced how the smuggling ring had exploited the frozen lake as a shortcut, moving product across the border during the harshest winter conditions when law enforcement presence was naturally reduced. Later that evening, Reynolds met with David, Eleanor, and George in a private conference room to explain what they had learned. Kate noticed unusual patterns during her regular patrols, vehicle movements that didn't make sense, especially during extreme weather, he explained, spreading out copies of her recovered notes. She began investigating quietly. The critical mistake she made was not realizing Gunderson was involved, which is why she kept her investigation unofficial. George nodded solemnly. She wouldn't have suspected her own sheriff. Kate believed in the system. A week later, Catherine Brennan received the funeral she deserved. Hundreds of police officers from across the state formed an honor guard under gently falling snow. Eleanor carried the navy blue sweater she had finished 13 years too late, placing it gently atop the casket. David followed with Kate's restored badge, his fingers lingering on the polished metal. The Lakewood Police Department held a memorial ceremony the following month, unveiling a plaque in the station lobby. Officer Catherine Brennan, 1950-1977. Her pursuit of truth continues to inspire us all. 1 year after the case was solved, David established the Catherine Brennan Foundation, dedicated to supporting families of officers killed in the line of duty and training search and rescue teams specializing in cold water recovery. The foundation quickly became recognized for its work with unsolved cases involving missing law enforcement personnel. At the Police Academy graduation ceremony that spring, David addressed the new cadets, Kate's photo displayed prominently beside him. Catherine Brennan taught us that integrity is priceless, he told the young officers, that a single determined officer can make a difference, even when it seems no one is listening. She showed us that the truth matters, no matter how deep it's buried or how powerful those who want it hidden. 13 years later, on a cold December morning, Eleanor Brennan visited Kate's memorial at Ellis Creek Bridge. She placed a single rose on the commemorative plaque, the bright red stark against the fresh snow. As she stood in quiet contemplation, she noticed a young female cadet in uniform doing the same. The young woman approached, her determined eyes instantly familiar to Eleanor. "My name is Sarah Matthews," she introduced herself. "David is my adoptive father. He told me everything about Kate, and it's because of her I decided to become a police officer. I wanted you to know her legacy lives on in each of us who've sworn to protect the truth, no matter how deeply it may be buried."